Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this evening. A little bit of an oddly timed stream, but one that just had to get done due to the breaking news. We are, of course, going to be discussing, kind of the huge story of the FBI raiding Trump's residence at Mar-a-Lago. But I am joined this evening by my co-host here, the Prudentialist. Thanks for joining me, sir.
Oh, thanks again for having me on. Greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to chat with a Prudentialist. And recently published in IM 1776, right?
I sure did, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a really interesting piece. And so if people haven't checked it out, they should do so. Also, Partisan O or
La-
Lafayette. I'm trying to remember his
Yeah,
first name.
Lafayette Lee just put out a really good
Lee.
piece today.
Yeah, he also had a good one. So some back to back strong pieces over there at I am 1776. So make sure that you're checking that out. But let's go ahead and get to it. So, in case, for some reason you just pay no attention to the news and only join this stream for your breaking news coverage, if so, more respect to you. But just in case you're not aware, the FBI yesterday, in the morning, raided the home or the residence, I guess you should say, of President Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. The charge or the pretext for this raid is, as I understand it, something to do with classified documents. In fact, if I've heard correctly, and again, we don't have everything at the moment, but from what I understand, it's classified documents specifically pertaining to like the National Archives. So just like things that they might want. So it seems like a very I'm sure we'll learn more. I'm sure there'll be more explanation or more kind of uh they'll construct something slightly more, hopefully. You think, at least, of a pretext to cover what they're doing here. But as far as we can tell so far, it just seems to connect to these classified documents. Now, obviously, that's weird for a lot of reasons. It's a really flimsy pretext, of course, because Trump would largely be able to classify whatever or declassify whatever he wanted to when he was president, right? So that's a very weird thing to attempt to use as a reason to raid his residence. Also, of course, the very obvious connection would be to Hillary Clinton, who famously had her bathroom server of emails. Was very deliberate in her destruction of all of that information. Seems very obvious that she, breached a number of different laws as Secretary of State in that role, when leaving and carrying those classified documents with her, or keeping that information in the manner that she did. But of course, no charges there. That's where a lot of the GOP is focused, of course. How could this possibly be the case? How could the Department of Justice and the FBI, apply the law in this instance? We'll be looking at a lot of the response from conservative commentators, of course, and members of Congress and the Senate. Some pretty weak tea out there in the face of what seems like a very unprecedented action here. But Prudentialist, what was your first response when you kind of heard that this was happening? That the FBI was raiding the home of a former president and possible and very likely future candidate.
I thought that the timing of it was very interesting because just a couple of days before the raid, there were quite a few sort of insider baseball politicos saying that like the Democrats really wanted Trump to announce prior to the midterms, and that would be sort of their way to leverage it. And now with the raid, I mean, you've definitely energized sort of what likes to be jokingly called like the boomer waffen. Like your mainstream core of the Republican Party is definitely energized and activated, but the pretense is still unknown whether or not it was over classified documentation or something else. They went through his personal stuff. Trump has said that they went through his safe. And now the other thing that's kind of come out is that apparently the judge that has signed off on the warrant, Bruce Reinhart, had worked with the Department of Justice inside of, working with Al Gore in the vice presidency's office. He recused himself famously with lawsuits between Trump and Clinton in the campaign trail previously. So we're in a place now of really an unknown level of formalizing the banana republic, and so now we're definitely just it's sort of all no holds bar of investigation of political opponents. And that was actually, I think, the very news chyron that Fox News went with, investigating a likely 2024 political opponent. And I watched Blue Check Twitter just be like, well, look at what Fox News is saying, when there's definitely something else that, what else could you call that? So I'm not. I'm concerned where this will go from here, because you've clearly we're now in unknown territory, where it's now very open, very public, and the DOJ, I mean, was weaponized the entire time with this administration, but also like we watched it work adamantly against Trump while he was in office, and here we are.
Yeah, this is, like you said, this is a very odd decision, right? There's a number of different reads you could apply to this, and that's, I guess, what makes it kind of interesting. Obviously, Trump bounced out of the White House under pretty suspicious circumstances. Everything that followed with, after all of the Russiagate stuff and everything, and then now, the January 6th committee, there's been a lot of show trials, a lot of manufactured evidence in the case of the Russiagate stuff. Like you said, weaponizing of the justice system and the federal bureaucracy has been pretty blatant the whole time. So in one way, this is simply I guess, the logical escalation of that behavior. At the same time, it feels very sloppy in some ways because, as you pointed out, very energizing to Trump's base. Gives pretty much, that's what I said, is that this pretty much has to guarantee Trump the nomination, right? Because at this point, if you allow the FBI to keep you from running Trump, then you're functionally saying the deep state can just throw an investigation on any candidate they see as a real threat to their power, and you'll immediately fold and run someone else who's supposed to be more electable.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is the really the doubling down of all regards to using every political apparatus against you. I mean, Obama had famously done it with the IRS in 2012, and I mean, look at that. This new $7 billion, faux Inflation Reduction Act bill is just pork full of things to give money to the IRS, 87,000 new agents and things like that. So, I really, if anything, we're watching political victories come out of the left that will more or less ensure that every facet of political auditing and making sure candidates can be investigated. I mean, this can happen both de facto and de jure, right? And you've got the two working hand in hand as it is. I mean, we saw this with Kyle Rittenhouse's trial, that you had people that would donate, even under the guise of anonymity, being flagged, doxxed, and fired from very public positions, whether you're a firefighter or city councilman. And now we're watching, more or less people thinking that, a lot of people in the sort of mainstream Republican commentariat saying that, yeah, this is some third world BS. I think, Dan Bongino had said that quite clearly, but I don't think that, I mean, we're really in foreign territory, it being so broad and so open and doubling down. And I don't know if the White House has actually put out a statement. I mean, Biden seems to be more or less talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and not doing anything else, but really it's the Republican Party commentary, people in actual positions, elected office, that are doing exactly what an outer party is supposed to do, which is to feign outrage but not really do anything.
Yeah, the White House did say later today that they basically they just heard about this with a public announcement, like everyone else, like that old
Oh, so
like,
Obama's, I heard
yeah,
about it on the
exactly.
news.
Yeah, the Obama chestnut of, yeah, I just looked at CNN and that's how I found out about the FBI raiding my political opponents, right? So I mean, though, to be fair, in the case of Biden, that's probably true. He probably still doesn't know that happened, right? So I mean, yeah, that's the great thing about having a completely senile puppet in the White House, is he's always telling the truth when he says he doesn't remember or didn't know. But yeah, that was the White House's statement. Interesting thing about this, again, with the forcing Trump to the forefront. Like you said, there's a lot of people in the Republican side or the GOP, the conservative commentators were like, well, now, that you just have to have like FBI reform at the front of your agenda when the Republicans retake the House. And it's just really laughable. There's one guy who's like, "Oh yeah, I mean the Democrats, they're so politically brilliant that in an election year they decided to add 87 thousand agents to the IRS." And it's like, yeah, man, because adding midterm elections are every couple years. Adding that many people to the federal bureaucracy who are like dedicated to destroying the livelihood of your sworn political enemies and just installing them in the federal bureaucracy for probably life. Yeah, I think that's actually a bigger win than like whether or not you move a couple seats in Congress one way or another. So we really see in a lot of ways that, Yarvin talks a lot about the difference between actual exercises of power and just trying to flex when you don't have it, right? And I think the Democrats kind of put it on display this week. They
Yeah,
had
this was a real flex of power, though. I
yeah.
mean, you can now go to the former president of the United States' private, I mean, it's very public residence, but his private residence and rifle through his things and going through his safe. And yeah, this is a real flex in power that you can literally walk into your opponent's house and rifle through their things.
And I think in general, the left are correct to not fear any political backlash because you can already see the hedging. There's a lot of hedging, unfortunately, from many top tier political pundits. Ben Shapiro and other guys are like, well, if there's not a big thing behind this, then someone should pay a price. It's like, so what would be the justifiable explanation here? The amazing thing is we seem to still have a lot of people on the mainstream right giving a thoroughly corrupt Justice Department the benefit of the doubt. Like they just they've got plenty of goodwill to spend on this. And even the people who are a little more serious are like, well, you have to reform the FBI. And my question today was on Twitter was like, okay, what does that even look like reform the FBI? What would Congress do about that? What if the conservatives had control of the legislature? What would that look like? Oh, you're going to switch out a department head or two? Obviously, this is a much bigger, more fundamental problem, and it seems like the only response is like, well, vote harder, and we'll swap out some dudes when we're in office.
Yeah, this is the thing about reform or even claims to abolition, right? Is this just, well, what does that look like to you? Where anytime that there's a cause to ban something or to change something, this is the famous manipulation of procedural outcomes to get a desired result. Because you
Hmm.
can move a few heads around, but that doesn't mean anything when the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation still abides by procedural guidelines to treat Trump supporters or Republicans or right wing Americans as domestic terrorists above all else. And I mean, at the same time, right, the political kayfabe has already begun talking about the 2024 primaries, where a lot of people are wanting to like shove Ron DeSantis in, saying that, like, yeah, this is a good thing that the former president of the United States has been convicted or he's being investigated or whatever. Like, all of this should be good because this means you can get a nice, pretty clean Ron DeSantis to sweep in 2024. And they're just acting like this is, really good for them when the gravity of the situation is both unprecedented, unfounded, and seriously, we're wandering into waters that haven't been seen before. But they're acting like, of course, everything is normal, and this is where we're at with them.
So, do you think that this was kind of inevitable? Because let's be honest, right? We had Trump basically walk up, as haphazardly as, of course, he did, being who he is. He basically walked up to the system. He walked the system to the edge. He got to the edge of the Rubicon, and he blinked, right? And if you blink in that instance, eventually they have to come for you, right? Like no one gets to take a shot at the king twice, right? A lot of conservatives were saying, well, the Biden administration crossed the Rubicon today. It's like, well, yeah, because what other option do they have when they watch someone kind of do what Trump at least threatened to do, right? Even if he never actually had any of the any of the ability or any of the wherewithal or any of the necessary political skill or anything to actually make those serious changes. They if someone actually looks at the real heart of the system and says this needs to thoroughly be changed, you can't just let them come back into office, right?
Well, yeah, and since you've done a video on it, academic agents in chat, and I just recently did a video on it. I mean, you're absolutely right because Trump is basically the embodiment of what De Juvenel would call the aristocracy, and he has the middle class rallying behind him. We're watching sort of the Republican Party try to attract what would be normally considered a part of the Democratic coalition of the lower, with either gaining the Hispanic vote, the rise of the far right Latina or multiracial whiteness, as they like to say. And so, you are seeing the only sort of genuine bastion of alternative, threats to power. And power always centralizes, and power has to snuff out any sort of competition. So, I'm actually, considering that they spent kicking the can down the road with January 6th trials, you would have thought that they would have had him arrested or something very sooner, right after the inauguration of President Biden. But no, like this is where we're at now.
I wonder if this is a failure of the system to deal with its political enemies correctly, right? Cleanly, right? Maybe if it was a more competent version of kind of the cathedral or the deep state, whatever you want to call it, if it was prior iterations, it would have disposed of Trump more cleanly. But because kind of just the haphazard manner they're applying it, they weren't able to get him with one thing, they weren't able to get him with the next. No one cares about the January 6th commission. Was this just kind of the final sloppy spasm of the system, just being like, fine, just whatever, just hit him with this and it'll take him out? Or do you think that this was a parallel strategy that was developed? That's a big question, right? Were there multiple avenues that kind of a centralized network were trying to apply to push Trump out? Or was this kind of just everyone moving in the same general direction, and kind of once one thing didn't work, the next thing was applied and the next thing was applied until kind of just this most base thin attempt was made?
Well, I don't know what the evidence was presented to get a warrant, though, right? And
Right.
my gut tells me, though, that this was something that they needed to have something stick, because I do feel like, and I know that our good friend the Distributist has talked about this, that really what I think that the purpose of the January 6th hearing was, what the purpose of the rhetoric for insurrection was to invoke the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment, so they couldn't have him run again. And that
Right.
really seems to have been the modus operandi out of the regime, since all of this stuff had started with Biden, was to somehow try and bury him away. We saw the outer party have huge discussions about a post-Trump right wing in America. All sorts of discussions over, well, what comes after Trump, what comes after the 2016 moment, and now at the same time, right, they're trying to make sure that there is no 2016 moment, there is no threat like that. It's the same reason why the I think a good portion of the COVID state of emergency by the Biden administration was extended, because that allows for all sorts of shenanigans to happen with for elections. So I do see that this is maybe just trying to get something that sticks, because the further and further that you try and just do these slow chipping away at legitimacy of any system, perceived or otherwise, eventually you're going to have to take action. And this was something that, as our good friend academic agent wrote in his book, The Populist Delusion, something that de Juvenel had noted, that, the reason when revolution happens is they do it when things are weak. So, when people like Tsar Nicholas II doesn't avenge his Rasputin, that's when revolution seems to be likely for fermenting. But if you do it here in the Biden administration when he seems weak, then, well, maybe it's a good time to show some force and power and go, investigate and ramble through the home of the former president of the United States, and most likely your 2024 opponent.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, again, application, because as you said, one of the things that they were trying to obviously catch Trump on was this insurrection clause. Many people had speculated that one of the reasons they attempted to apply or we think, maybe, again, a lot of speculation here, that they're using this classified document attempt or justification for the raid, is that somewhere in the federal code it says that if you're found guilty of the violation of that code, then you lose your office and you're not able to run again. I think it's been made very clear by multiple people that that doesn't actually apply, because the requirements of the Constitution would supersede the federal code. You would need an actual constitutional amendment to the legit Trump's ability for second.
Well, I would imagine that. Well, what's the one thing even though it's been complete bunk since the beginning, the one narrative that they love to run with, though, and especially now in the midst of the current conflict in Ukraine, of course, was the Russian collusion stuff, right? And so classified documentation, you add that on there. I mean, what a great way to supplant the idea that, like, oh, he's a traitor to the United States, and by pinning this on him. But I mean, that may be the way to do it, right? Because there's basically only really two ways that you can't run for office. I think it's basically the Insurrection Act clause, the 14th Amendment, some kind of, I mean, some states I think have some sort of restriction, but more or less that or treason. And so this is where you're at. But at the same time, right, we don't know. And I mean, the other interesting thing that I've noticed is that I haven't seen too much leaked out of this FBI raid. I haven't seen like exclusive documents being sent to Rachel Maddow's desk or Brian Stelter from CNN saying anything. So I'm very curious as to what will come out of this, because again, this is still very fresh and we're in the dark.
And I think that really lends credibility, or at least to the strength to the argument that this is a fishing expedition, because we've seen that the DOJ is very happy to parade these type of things, to park CNN trucks outside of the home of Trump connected officials or campaigners when they're going to arrest them, that kind of thing. They've been more than happy to, like you say, leak these things to friendly journalists and put friendly news outlets out front when they're going to perp walk these people. They've been shameless in kind of, again, that flex of power in those scenarios. So the fact that this one was a little more low key, like you said, less coming out, going to these kind of friendly preferred news organizations, might mean that there's more going on here. They might not have the slam dunk they want. Or they might be this might be where they're trying to kind of rustle up those things to kind of shift the ground under the 2024 election. But I wanted to take a look at Reinhardt here, because a number of people brought this up. This was an interesting development. So this is the magistrate who ended up approving the warrant to raid Mar-a-Lago. And apparently Reinhardt used to be a federal prosecutor in Florida and was working on the plea deal for Jeffrey Epstein. And not only was he working on this plea deal, apparently he, in the middle of like working on this plea deal, after working for the the prosecutor's office for like over a decade, decided to leave and immediately go into private practice and represent Epstein. Like immediately after leaving here, like almost immediately after leaving the office. So he was working on a plea deal against Epstein, and then left. And which is amazing that we even allow that as an option legally in the United States. But this guy obviously connected to some incredibly shady things, and really makes you wonder kind of how deep this goes. I mean, obviously, I guess maybe they just are going to have dirt on anyone in these scenarios. That's one of the reasons they're using him, maybe. But it does seem like a pretty bold connection to leave just lying around directly to the Epstein case, and the way he flipped in the middle of the negotiation to represent Epstein. That's a pretty wild thing to link back to your attempt to basically, seems like you're going to try to arrest a president. Like that seems like a huge deal.
Yeah, this kind of also reminds me because that's at the same time that what was it? Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar got all that flack for cutting some sort of plea agreement with Jeffrey Epstein in Florida in 2007, 2008, and this is the guy that he's working with. Well, what are what are the odds? So it definitely does raise some more interesting questions because I think that between, Epstein's, of course, suicide that is not a suicide, and the now recent case that they had with Miss Maxwell and her not giving out any information. I mean, it really does act like they're just protecting their own at this point. And if Trump has any sort of classified documentation about that, that might be an interesting way to go on a fishing expedition and make sure that Alex Acosta, thank you chat for correcting me. But yeah, it does say a lot though for what he might have and whatnot. Definitely some things there to point out.
Absolutely. And also interesting, obviously, Trump appointed the FBI director who led this raid or who ordered this raid basically on him. I think that, obviously it's weird because in a lot of ways I feel like Trump isn't the threat to the system that they treat him as. Like he's very clearly was willing to appoint guys like John Bolton and Christopher Wray and like all these people who are more than happy to kind of turn on him on a dime. The people who are completely connected to the machine that hates him. So it feels like another set of another term in the office wouldn't be that dangerous because Trump can just be easily kind of convinced to put these people in place who will have no loyalty to him, have no interest in protecting him, no interest in just having basic patronage to the guy who put them in their position. But at the same time, they seem willing to just go out on a limb and kind of make things very blatant and the corruption and the banana republic nature of these things very obvious in the pursuit of keeping him kind of away from this run for a second term. What do you think that is? Do you think it's the movement behind Trump is more dangerous than Trump himself, or do they really think that he's he really has it in him to like clean house next time he would get into office? What do you think that is?
I don't think that Trump necessarily has the leadership capacity to do this. I think that he got in and played Twitter president for 4 years. I mean, there's plenty of things within Trump's administration in his first term that are beyond worthy of praise. Whether it was sort of a more restrained aspect in regards to foreign affairs, trying to negotiate ways out of that thing, putting a more emphasis on trade issues and American manufacturing, immigration, of course. But I mean, there was just time after time after time after time where the bureaucratic state, the managers really of these federal bureaus that he is the executive elite leads over. That's the issue, right? Like monitoring the situation only allows you to you have your head bashed in when the FBI or whatever turns documents to your enemies and things like that. He didn't really do anything at that time. He didn't have anyone loyal to him. He did leave a lot off to Jared Kushner. He listened to Ivanka when he was like playing issues about like, paid family leave. Is this like all of a sudden this is a Republican talking point now? Perhaps really this is a poke though at his associates because I mean the last time that we were on chatting, we were talking about sort of the institutions and crowds that were really oriented around like Schedule F for federal employees, talking about what needs to be done to make sure that house can be cleared. But I mean, I really don't think that it'll get to a point under Trump. I think that really if his attitude from the first term is any different, what doesn't change from the second, I mean, why wouldn't the regime want a great win for him in 24 and let nothing happen and more of their guys continue to undermine him every which way? I mean, this is just another way to show that you've got power. All of this time, it does seem very interesting because I mean, if he is reelected, I mean, yeah, it'd be cool for Schedule F to happen. We can purge 50,000 federal employees, but it does leave a lot to show what might happen. And again, I think that we definitely know from everything that we've seen with regards to our friends over with like Andrew Kloster and such, that there are individuals that look forward to taking revenge, but maybe not Trump in that way.
Yeah, like you said, I think he would need a far more serious group of people with a far more visionary mindset behind him to make that change. And I'm rooting for those guys, but I don't feel like there's a lot even from the wells that they're drawing from seem pretty shallow. And as we talked about, because you and I now have done a couple of different streams basically around this idea of the criminalization of political opposition in the United States, and how we just keep seem to be relentlessly marching to it. I don't think either of us probably expected us to get to this point this quickly, but they were already taking these steps that made it virtually impossible for like anyone who really wanted to get in there and make a change to kind of get out with their skin intact, right? Like if you go in and you work for the second round of the Trump administration, you're probably just going to need to like have a lawyer on retainer the minute you walk into your office, because they're going to attempt to destroy your life in pretty much every way imaginable. Their legal action, criminal charges, investigations are just layered on you relentlessly. What kind of person who's looking to, kind of build a career for themselves is going to walk voluntarily into the Trump administration? Not that many. So they were already going to have kind of this huge issue trying to recruit the necessary talent and that kind of thing. So it was already going to be an uphill battle. And then, of course, watching them go after Trump the way they're going now, again, you've just got to ask, is this the end of effective political opposition in the United States? Have they basically secured, you know, Nikki Haley and Mitt Romney, candidates for the future going forward? Would any Republican truly be crazy enough to step back into the breach this way again?
I mean, most likely not, based on how the Republican response has seemingly been. I mean, whether it was Kevin McCarthy of the House Minority Leader talking about how clear your calendar, Christopher Wray, like, when we take back the House, well, very just huff and guff about reform and investigations, the same usual political theater we've seen anytime that there's some kind of um, sort of scandal or big event like this that has happened. And then at the same time, right, the other issue is that you watched other candidates that may smell blood in the water and want to do things for their own political career. We've watched that the Trump administration's like associates throughout his entire time in office have been more or less on two sides. Either they've doubled down and they still work very closely with him, or they've done their best to sort of recuperate their image. I mean, for the love of God, Sean Spicer, the first communications director guy or press secretary, was on Dancing with the Stars. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina was earlier today saying that, it was probably, we need to let the facts play out of this investigation, speaking with absolute naivete, which at this point, it's not naivete. It is purposefully intended to be, well, we should make sure that the FBI isn't acting in a political way. Which is absolutely stupid. And because we know that this is political. Every institution of government is done and acted in a political way, whether it is the FBI, whether it is the IRS, the DHS. Every three-letter acronym that we can think of that comes out of government has been used in some form or fashion for domestic politicking. And so I think that you are sort of really beginning to see the cracks begin to show about how much legitimacy that the system has left, because you either use force and you start pushing down on things, and from there you like do what you're doing now, which is raiding and arresting or potentially arresting people and subpoenaing people to stand for these government show trials, including political opposition all over America, not just Trump. Or you sit back and you watch power be attained and see serious challenge like has been discussed. And so that's the problem, I think, that we're here. But I mean, even the careerists that we've talked about, whether it's the guys at Claremont or those with Campaign for American Renewal, even they're having problems staffing it, because I think that the last 4 years, and even now with Biden's administration in office and the media going on for 6 years now, has done an excellent job of painting him as the ultimate political poison pill.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of, just kind of, well, we're going to give the FBI a really stern talking to, that that seemed to be the default rhetoric. In fact, we even had guys like Tim Scott basically go on there and like, yeah, you just got to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're just like this is the first time we've ever seen any of this happen, and I a lot of these people are not the brightest bulbs, to be honest. One of those scary things that happens when you start talking to politicians is you realize that some of them are brilliant, but some of them are just not. And so you want to assume that these people are just they don't get it, right? They don't understand. But at this point, how can you not? How can you stare at the record of the DOJ and the FBI and all these agencies that have worked to just, directly and obviously malicious scenario, especially, and like, yeah, this is fine, right? Like there's not a huge issue going on here. I'm sure that we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. We'll have an investigation or something, and everyone will come around. And so it really seems, it seems like there's just no avenue for the GOP to remedy this, and I guess the question is what does that look like next? Because if we're not going to see any real candidates come forward, right? If they're flexing, and this is my theory, like I think they're flexing on Trump in the manner that they're flexing on because Trump I think kind of took on the desperation of kind of the boomer conservative, like some people I think are in blue states or they're in blue areas, they're a little more urban, and so they just don't understand like the level of personal loyalty that Trump has from these people. Like Trump is Caesar for them. Trump is a messiah figure for them in a lot of ways. He's like the last, this is the like the Steve Turley thing and the all that stuff, like that works for a reason. Like these people really do believe that you're just at any moment Trump will spring and take on his destiny to just crush these people under his feet. I think that once that myth is dispelled, the system is hoping that they've just finally broken anyone who would really oppose them in any serious way, because the boomers are in many ways kind of the last ones with the means to actually kind of put up a real resistance. There are many in our more current generation, your and mine, that might be more jaded with the system, who might want to see more real change, but just don't have the resources as a generation in total to really make those moves. And so I think that's one of the reasons that they're really trying to keep Trump out of office for a second time, not so much for what he might do, but what his followers might compel him towards once he's there. There's a lot to be said of great men are important, but also they tend to embody movements, and I think that's what happened to Trump in some ways in the first place anyway. And I think that above all is what they're worried about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think definitely more younger generations are probably a little more disaffected and tired of politics. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself as someone who is nearing 30 and can see it on the horizon is what you would ideally look for in Republican exit polling data, right? You're looking at baby boomers, you're looking at older Gen X types that solidly vote and have the time to get involved and maybe have some money on the side to do so. And I mean that's the reason why like the Steve Turley bid is always so like really effective, because it does garner up that sort of raw American football style of politics that thinks that you're really just that one Hail Mary pass away from complete and total victory at the big state game. And it's effective really at getting to money to flow. It's a really good way of getting people still invested in a system that hasn't been working for them for at least 65 years. And so, yeah, I mean, also we should also not forget that the last, his entire administration, the election, I mean, we're beyond polarized, right? The idea of having leftist friends in a lot of meaningful way, like especially like politically polarized one, has they don't want to talk to you. I mean, I have rougher relationships with some of my actual family because of politics. I mean, the last 4 years really did break a lot of people in regards to his administration. So I could imagine that they're probably just as terrified of them in the same way that a lot of these older, MAGA types really want to take action. I mean, there's plenty of footage on Twitter right now of just cars all over Mar-a-Lago resort of Trump supporters protesting and wanting to take action. And I think that many are probably fearful that this is maybe a moment where political violence would actually happen. And so, yeah, they've got to clamp down on it now. They've got to do something because those guys to them are dangerous because for all of the fantasy or the discourse around, a conflict or a national divorce, I mean, eventually once you get things up to a boiling point, it's sort of now or never, and people are going to clamp down or people are going to take action. And I think that's something that they are terrified of.
Yeah, I think especially again among that that boomer contingent, they feel that that noose tightening a little more, and so I think you're right that that is something that the powers that be are certainly keeping an eye on. At the same time that they're also kind of uh, flexing this power. So we know that the Democrats obviously have made this move. We saw the IRS agents, that kind of thing. How far do you think the Democrats really go? Do you think, again, we're all speculating here, obviously, like, so we don't have any hard, but do you think that they would, do you think this is to rustle the feathers, or do you think that they wouldn't put this in place if they didn't have more to go on, if they weren't looking to actually like bring charges against Trump?
Well, I mean, that's the thing about that's the question that I don't know the answer to because a lot of the um, January 6 trials have been really flimsy evidence. I mean, more and more information has come out about federal agitation. I mean, yes, plenty of people did go in there and cause a ruckus, but I mean, you cannot deny that there was a lot of sort of entrapment also taking place there. And these guys are being treated as political prisoners with judges very much ready to not give them a single bit of evidence that would be um, I'm trying to now find a legal term off the top of my head, but that would be beneficial in their favor or their case and things like that. And so this to me is I don't know how what they've got, and even if they did, right, how inclined is the average sort of person on the right to take it with a grain of salt because of how much the FBI has been politicized, of how much the regime does target the enemy, and so that's definitely the grave concern there is that I don't think that they really do have anything. Maybe they do, and again, only time will tell. But my gut tells me that they only need a flimsy excuse that they can pull out in front of one of their guys in a court, their cronies, and just be like, "Yeah, okay, that looks good. I can just sign the warrant and send them out, do what needs to be done," because so much of that was done for other political opposition in America.
Yeah, I feel like I've said multiple times, and you're alluding to there, the time of persuasion is kind of over, right? Like they're not going to pull a bunch of evidence out that's going to sway a bunch of people who are already in Trump's camp. The polarization is already too thorough, and so it's really just finding those thin justifications for power, for the application of power and punishment of your political enemies. I guess, like I said, it feels like they were running down a checklist of things to hit Trump with, and they kind of just got to the very end of it and were like, fine, whatever, just go to his house, like just go raid the house and we'll find something. Which, I guess you can do when you own all this apparatus of the state. But it feels like there's a reason this feels like kind of a watershed moment. It feels like we're very close to just laying the bare wires of power, like, raw, right, and just open. And you thought we were there before. Like, I thought it was kind of obvious once we got to maybe the last election cycle or something, or the COVID stuff. But I mean, this, there's a reason everyone is referring to this as a banana republic. Is that's it's exactly what you're talking about here. Is like when the powers that be are willing to, or don't want someone around, they're more than willing to just unleash the state at them. And the most amazing thing, and the thing that still is kind of wild to me, even as much as I've been talking about this for years at this point, is how comfortable it seems like everybody is knowing that the president of the United States is not in charge of any of this. Like, has no. It's very clear Joe Biden can barely string a sentence together. Probably doesn't know what he ate for breakfast. Can't put his clothes on. And it's very clear that other people are operating the country, and not just like in the sense that every president has advisors and they largely like inform policy decision and that kind of thing, but in the very real sense that like there is no, it is completely out to lunch and no decisions are being made by the person who was elected. The oligarchy is very clearly in charge in all but name. It feels like the kind of just this gruesome, skin suit of a constitutional republic hanging over the oligarchy, and they're more than willing to at this point just kind of like peel back the skin and just let everybody grab a peek without actually knowing who runs the United States. I think I forget who it was, but they had a very interesting article title. I didn't get to read the whole article, but I want to go back and read it. It's someone that Radlib shares all the time. But they basically was like, what happens when people start asking to actually talk to the real government of the United States?
Oh,
Like,
that
what,
was a Caitlin Johnstone article.
yeah,
She's sort
okay.
of the last of the anti-war left, and there's a great political cartoon attached where President Xi Jinping is calling up the White House and is like, "Listen, Joe, things are very serious. I need to talk to the actual people in charge."
Right.
And I mean, it's a great cartoon because I mean that really does highlight. I mean, for almost every administration that I can, at least in my lifetime, I mean, you can say that Obama probably had far more control over things due to his own sort of insecurity and narcissism. But I mean, especially with this one, right? There's plenty of footage I think I saw today of the difficulty of Joe Biden even putting his blazer on and
Yeah, he
needing his
couldn't put his
wife to
jacket
do it.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't put his jacket on. President name only, as someone pointed out in chat, which I think is great because the people that are here in charge, um, a lot of them I think are both semi-public, but most of them I think are very private figures. And so now here we go, where we don't know what this means both for foreign relations, right? Because every time that Biden has said something, he's got to be quickly corrected by the White House press secretary about what he actually meant. And at the same time, the situation continues to deteriorate, where they've got to go out of their way and keep taking steps and action to make it look like the ship is still running. It has a very, very dangerous weekend at Bernie's feel because you guys are in charge of the largest economy, but also one of the largest militaries and nuclear arsenals on Earth. And from now, it seems like we're getting a peek behind the curtain and are seeing the ugly man behind, and not the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
And just at every turn, of course, and I already don't feel great about democracy, but just at every turn we have to hear about, this is, the we have to maintain the democratic norms. We have to, this is for, they're threatening our sacred democracy. They were in the halls of our sacred Congress, that of our democracy, blah blah blah. And then we just watch these people just blatantly be like, yeah, obviously, like, the president isn't in charge and we can just go after the last president and the guy who would probably run next time. And what are you going to do about it, right? And nobody knows who's actually ordering it. There's no one to actually hold accountable. There's not even a real figurehead. Like, even the figurehead is a joke at this point. Like, obviously, you look at someone like you say, Bush or Reagan or someone are figureheads in large part, but they don't even have like a decent actor up there anymore at this point. And so it's just amazing. Again, never look at your enemies and expect them not to be hypocritical. You're not going to shame them out of it, but it is just amazing that routinely we can just see this rhetoric of the necessary sacredness of democracy, while obviously just throwing the constitutional system of government in the trash, operating the entire country under this kind of loose moving mass of organizations without any real direction. And then being in this scenario where we're not sure who's in charge, but we know it's not the president. We know that, even when the president gets up there and says something ridiculous, we know his minders are just going to come behind us and tell us who the people actually in charge, or what the people actually in charge think should happen. It's just insane. It's an insane spectacle to watch. And now that they've just crossed this line where they're willing to openly investigate and quite possibly charge their political opposition with really almost no pretense to their actions. It just to have to watch them day in and day out harp on the democratic norms and the dangers to civic virtue or whatever. It's just I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be amazed. It shouldn't shock me the way it does. But it's still, every time I'm still blown away.
Well, it escalates because apparently this is earlier today. Representative Scott Perry files articles of impeachment against Merrick Garland of the DOJ, and Garland has sent to the FBI to retrieve his private cell phone and take a look at what he's got going and seeing if there's any connection supposedly to Trump. So, Scott Perry was a close ally to Trump during the 2020 election and things like that. So, I mean, here we are. The criminalization of political opposition. If you are going to say anything, here's your poison pill. Instead, talk about FBI reform, talk about Ron DeSantis, and not the fact that we are now living in the most clearly. I mean, this is at a period of time where the criminalization of political opposition is like, okay, you're accused of working with a collaborator, you're working with an insurrectionist, you're working with a traitor, and here we are now where it feels almost akin to the cold civil war of America turning very, very openly hot, where Lincoln, of course, would have suspended quite a bit of rights, whether it be habeas corpus, whether it would be a lot of the proceedings that would allow someone to voice their grievances in such a way. And now here we are.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we've stacked up quite a number of super chats, so we better get started if we ever want to see the other side of them here. Let's see. Pete Budapest for $9.99. There are only two conclusions from this, both black pills. One, the regime is super stable and has crossed Rubicon to formal left-wing authoritarianism, or two, the regime is super unstable and is failing. Yes, Pete, thank you for your donation. And yeah, I mean, obviously it kind of does need to be one of those two, right? Like either they're really inept and desperate and they're willing to make these moves to try to solidify power that they feel is slipping out of their hands, or they feel so confident that they don't need to kind of keep this sham going anymore. Obviously, there are no good answers to that question, but that's kind of the problem when you lose control of pretty much all of your governing apparatus. You probably don't expect a lot of good outcomes there, and unfortunately, probably the fact that it would be unstable would be the better of those two options. But obviously, that's not what anyone who's hoping to have a nice, easy, stable, next 10, 15, 20 years is hoping to hear.
I'm inclined to find that there's probably stability, and probably stability in part due to a vast amount of foreign investment as well. Like for all the stir craziness that the trip to Taiwan Pelosi had, I can't help but think of how much espionage has taken place on the West Coast in California, whether it's Stanford University, Representative Eric Swalwell, Dianne Feinstein's driver, and not to mention her own chip investments in the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company. I mean, perhaps there's just a ton of stability here because, if you're going to loot the treasury and you're collaborating with outside forces to do so, you sure as hell better make it stable.
All right. Our next one here, Pirate Dragon for $2. Thank you very much. Notice you blocked Stained Haynes. Why? I don't know, man. To be honest, I have a lot of people on Twitter that I interact with. So I am not really sure who that is or why they might be blocked. I would need more information. It's not something I remember off the top of my hand. I don't block a whole lot of people. It's usually just because someone keeps spamming. That's usually why. If they're just not adding anything useful, then that's the most likely reason. But I really don't know who that person is off the top of my head. So sorry, I can't give you more information there. Let's see. Howard Mills for $5. Right when he needs to embrace more ideas from the likes of Francisco Franco and Jose Primo de Rivera, others instead of Lolbert Coxever's talking points. Well, obviously, there's going to be a big question about what the Republican Party is actually going to do in the face of this. I don't think you're going to see a lot of them talking about Franco, but there is going to be a lot of people who are going to ask, what actual actions are you going to take? And I don't think that most Republicans and conservative pundits have a good answer to that question, because there aren't a lot of good answers. It's very difficult. Again, most of the Republicans are very invested in kind of keeping the machinery in place as it is. That's where their power comes from, just as much as it is the Democrats. There are some who are, I think, legitimately trying to make a difference and make changes in those areas, but there just aren't enough of them. Those few are painted as radical at pretty much every turn, and even most of their supposed partisan kind of teammates don't really ally with them. They're far more interested in just kind of running cover and keeping things, focused. Yeah, don't forget to go back and get the tax cuts next time. I think is going to continue to be the push of a large majority of the GOP. Hopefully, that's not enough. That we see some shift in the demands of the electorate. But again, I just, if you're banking on kind of the mass of people to change things, then you've got kind of a long road to hoe.
Yeah, I would agree that different talking points need to be prescribed. This grave, violation of our democratic norms and principles has been said ad nauseum, really, in my mind, since FDR, probably earlier. So something will have to change or give. I do not expect the rhetoric of the Republican Party to change, especially with its leadership in mind, whether it is Kevin McCarthy, Senator McConnell, Tim Scott, the SOB. I mean, these are individuals who recognize that their status in society, even if it means sort of playing the heel as the big mean Republicans in the media, their status disappears the moment that they start going against the grain. And so you either replace these people, or that you have a new crop of people take over, and that's what has to come out of it. And so again, it's you're dealing with people in charge who are the leaders of these parties and of these political ideas, Republicans and otherwise, that know where their goose is cooked, and they're not going to be changing their talking points anytime soon.
We've got Joseph V for $4.99. Maybe they just have an Indiana Jones complex. Those documents belong in the archives. Yes, that's belong in a museum. I don't know if that's the compulsion of the FBI, but that's impossible. That's possible. If they all show up with bullwhips, we'll know where that came from here. Thank you for donation. Let me find our next one here. I know I saw him. Oh, there he is. All right. Glow in the dark here for $10. Thank you very much. Says two things that worry about Trump. One, would disrupting many plans that have been decades in the making, like net zero. Two, his supporters having someone to be a champion, even if flawed champion. Yeah, I mean, I really do think that number two is a big problem for them. They really don't want anyone who can rally kind of that spirit. They do want that kind of never-ending succession of kind of controlled opposition. Again, that Mitt Romney, Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley is the future of the Republican Party type rhetoric. That's what they're looking for. Nikki Haley is my spirit animal. Those are the kind of people that they want. Kind of in there in perpetuity. They don't know anyone who's actually going to speak to the concerns. And Trump, for all of his many flaws, because he wasn't really an experienced political actor, because he wasn't really plugged into the system, was able to kind of echo a number of the things, the real concerns of the right, in a way that pretty much no one else has been able to. And that's what made him very dangerous to the system. And I don't think they want to see that again. They just don't think they want to unleash kind of those supporters. They don't want them to have another outlet for kind of that discontent.
Yeah, I mean, this is Glow in the Dark makes very good points here. I mean, Trump's in 2016 in the campaign trail more or less did a lot of good work at nuking, for instance, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and other disastrous foreign policy that was being pushed by the Obama administration's pivot to Asia. And I mean, even now, despite being with his Twitter account gone and not really making regular media appearances, and there are still people that are, this is it, this is ride or die, that people in the middle of nowhere that have watched their part of this country get deindustrialized, flooded with drugs, flooded with crime, that they will cling on to him till the very end. And so, for better or for worse, I mean, there's a huge chunk of the American electorate that was willing to go and risk and is in jail for what happened in January because of this man. So if you're going to go for the guy that many people would prefer as the king in exile, then yeah, you've got to take a shot at the king again.
So we've got David Hannell, I think, for 4.99. Thank you very much. Ted K writes, conservatives are fools because they cling on to old world systems before technology. Do you believe conservatism is possible in modernity? Well, of course, the problem there is our definition of conservatism. Do we mean like there's just right wing, or do we mean like the modern conservatism? Do we mean like Burkean conservatism? I think that there is truth to the fact that the the presence of technology and the effect it has on culture makes a more classic understanding of conservatism difficult, which is also a lot of kind of what Nick Land talks about, right? And the question is there any real opposition to it? Is the only way that this kind of stops is if it burns itself out. The only way out is through, right? Is there any real way to stop the skid, or is the only thing that's stopping the skid the wall? And I think that there's probably something to that, but that's, unfortunately, I understand why, but it's not what a lot of people want to hear, right? Because that's admittedly very blackpilling. It can be, right? Like there's just no way to escape this cycle until it kind of burns itself out. Is really not what people want to hear. They don't want to hear that they're kind of stuck in a part of history that from which is, they're not going to soon escape. It's a very difficult question. It's one that causes a lot of people a lot of problems. But I think there's probably some level of truth in the fact that and then we're kind of inevitably moving towards something that we won't escape until kind of the consequences end up raining down on people in a very difficult way.
Yeah, and I mean, courtesy of our friend Skeptical Waves, Mr. Kaczynski's "The System's Greatest Trick" is available for you to listen to, and it does talk about this as well. That clinging on to these old world systems before technology, is the technological society that we live in, creates new ways for the system to still be in charge, whilst rampant problems continue to exist. And I mean, conservatism kind of does that, where it does cling to these old world ideas while watching both technology in terms of like an industrial sense, but also like social technology and how to manage people evolves rapidly before them. So they're playing, it's like going to World War II with a bunch of, basically muzzle loaders against like the advancing German army. And so that's definitely a valid critique, I think, that he brings up. I mean, do you believe conservatism is possible in modernity? It goes just back to what you would define conservatism. I wouldn't consider myself a conservative in
Right.
this regard, right? So, but I mean, if what conservatism is in, say, like the classical liberal sense, then no, it isn't possible in modernity, because we sure as heck don't live in a classically liberal system.
So Michael here asked real quick, is there anywhere else you can super chat besides YouTube? The great Satan won't accept my money. Uh, Sorry guys, right now I don't have something like Entropy set up, though I probably should. If you want another place to support, if that's all you're looking for, you can go to Subscribestar, or you can go to the Substack and subscribe there. Both of those are linked down in the description. If you are looking specifically for the super chat, I will start looking into trying to do the entropy links, but sorry, I don't have that prepared right now. Jay Burden for $5. What are thoughts on being a legit political attack versus red meat for offals? Catching up now, so unsure if this has been addressed. I mean, I think that there is probably some level of legitimacy here. I think they are going after Trump in a particular way. I don't think this is just a complete show to flex for kind of their audience, their MSNBC audience or whatever. But I don't know how deep they'll go. Like, I don't know how serious they'll get. I mean, you already had the January 6th. If you were just looking to like give again, the MSNBC drones like something to stare at and hoot for, you could have just strung that out further, right? I guess Ukraine is done, so maybe we need the next thing. I don't know. But I do feel like they probably have more than just riling up their base and involved in this.
Yeah, I mean, a political attack versus red meat for offals. I would find this to be far more of a very serious thing than just saying something about Trump or January 6th. I mean, who's paying attention to that trial anyway? I mean, it's your blue checkmark actors and it's wine moms that vote blue no matter who. So this is definitely something more serious.
JS here, thank you for your donation. Has Trump now become the U.S. version of Navalny? Is that how you say it? I'm not sure. It's a Russian guy, right?
Yeah, the guy that the Americans wanted to be the president in elections to replace Vladimir Putin. I,
I don't know. Is he supposed to be standing in for another country at that point? I don't. Is
well,
this
now
saying he's an
Navalny's
agent
in
of Trump?
jail, so
Okay.
I mean,
Oh, okay.
maybe that's maybe if they decide to arrest him, maybe that's what becomes it. But I mean, no, he's got what, like a 5% approval, or like he had 5% in the polls or whatever. I mean, there was when Americans typically we support a guy, whether it's him or Juan Guaido in Venezuela, like if things don't bode well the first go around, they kind of get tossed to the side. But I mean, that would require some like foreign investment or some support for that to happen for Trump. But if they arrest him, who knows? It would be definitely the first. I mean, when's the last time someone was running for president in jail? Like Eugene Debs for the Socialists, like
Yeah.
over 100 years ago.
Yeah. All right. So we've got. Hold on there. There we go. We got Michael Robinson for $20. Thank you very much. Very impressive. You officially appeared on every Daily Wire show that is worth appearing on. Congratulations on all your success lately. Although there is one last show you'll do well on for maximum clout. Hashtag Dark Auron. Yeah, thank you very much. For those who didn't catch it, Michael Knowles was kind enough to have me on his show. We taped it a couple weeks ago, but they released it over the weekend, which I didn't know it was being released. They didn't give me a heads up of when it was going to be released. So I just started having people like show up on my videos and comment, "Love John" on Michael Knowles. So that's how I found out. But yeah, no, it's been pretty wild. Just kind of the different places I've been able to appear here lately. Very exciting. Just hoping I can do a good job. Seems to be going well so far. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. And who knows, if you can be booked on any of those shows, you just let me know. All right. Let's see. Our next one here, falling outside the normal constraints. For $2, thank you. In recognition of Turnip's killer viral tweet. Yes, if you haven't seen Turnip's tweet, it's him doing it has the They Live news anchors, and they are talking about like all the stuff the FBI is going to find in Mar-a-Lago. Like, oh yeah, we found like this handwritten note talking about the need to destroy all of his political enemies and charge the White House, and just like all these embezzlement records and stuff. It was very good. It actually Paul Joseph Watson ended up using it on his video today. So congratulations to Turnip. Excellent work. Made me proud. Let's see. $2 here. Hillary is flexing about the FBI raid. Yeah, that was another interesting thing. People are like, can you believe that you even have some Democrats kind of gloating about this, right? Can you see them taking victory laps about this? It's like, well, yeah. I mean, again, they feel like they're in power. They kind of have every expectation to pay no cost for this. Is it gross? Is it ugly? Yeah, I guess. Is it disciplined? Should they be doing it? Maybe not, but they feel very confident in their ability to get away with it, and I can't really say that they'll see any near-term consequences for it right now.
Yeah, I mean, she had that tweet about her wearing a hat that said "but her emails" or whatever. I mean, if there's one person that cannot be touched, it really is Hillary Clinton, because every time that you have information that could lead to her arrest, you magically end up disappearing. So,
Yeah, you don't want to lift weights. You don't want to lift
yeah,
weights if you know anything about Hillary Clinton.
yeah, don't do that. So, make sure you're also in good mental standing. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, her flexing about it, I just doesn't surprise me. I'm sure she was demonically cackling as that tweet was sent.
Didn't help John McAfee, to tell everybody he was still happy and whatnot. Wild that that he talked to Settlers Lament, just like a year before that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's see. Narco Republican for $5. Tonight's show is sponsored by the new audiobook channel, Ricatio. I don't know how
Reactio.
is that how we should pronounce it? Okay. Right now, premiering Diary of a Man in Despair by Frederick Reich. Yeah, make sure to check out Skeptical Wave's new audiobook channel. He's got a new one over there that he's doing like translations, right? Or
I
is
don't
it
think
only
this is
dedicated?
Waves. This is a
Oh,
separate gen. So because
okay.
the audio is not the infamous Skeptical Waves computer voice. This is far more human sounding. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, this is a brand new channel. So
Oh, okay.
in your catalog of great audio guys, there's Skeptical Waves, there's Counter Rev Audio,
Counter
and
Rev,
now
yeah.
Reactio.
Excellent. All right, so another excellent producer on the scene. All right, Glow in the Dark for $2. IRS noose is for the boomers. Yeah, I mean that seems very likely. I mean, like I said on Twitter, the only thing left to do is kind of bleed what's left of the middle class, right? Like they don't have the ability to turn the ship around. The system's falling apart, and so the only thing left to do is kind of just suck the marrow out of the bones here. And so it's very clear that that's who this is going to be leveled at. If you can't fix the fact that there's like massive shoplifting rings and crime waves and murder rates spiking, the one thing you can do is hire more people to drain enough money out of the remaining small business owners or boomers or whatever to make sure you can ship it over to Ukraine. You can launder it through Ukrainian oligarchs and whatnot. That does seem to be a big part of that motivation.
Yeah, I mean, the IRS is probably the most effective political weapon because even if they're not going through your wallet personally, if you donate to any sort of political action, there you go.
Yeah. All right, Glow in the Dark again for $5. Deep State is like an octopus trying to stand on two tentacles to look like a human. Yeah, they need a good trench coat. And good trench coat will do a lot.
That would be an excellent tweet, sir. You should, if you have a Twitter, go do that so we can retweet it.
Yes. Let's see. Winston Fujimori here. Let me grind his. Joined the Prudentialist subscribe star the other day at $20. I hope he's able to get a super surplus of his bonitis. Is that the correct way to?
I have no idea. It's not what it's not the medicine I get. I'd get anti-rejection medication from my
Okay.
kidney transplant that I
Yeah.
use. But Mr. Fujimori, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Everyone should, of course, be helping out our favorite frog here. He's doing great work. Again, make sure you check out that article over at IMC 1776. Let's see. Oh, Winston again here says, in all seriousness, Trump effed us over by going along with the lockdowns, Operation Warp Speed, pushing the vaccine. I want DeSantis to said in 2024. Yeah, so I get this, right? Like, and this is a big thing. It's like, okay, how scary can Trump be if he really didn't push back in these areas and he kind of, obviously helped put people like Fauci into power? Like how dangerous can he really be to the system with kind of the way he ran his presidency? But at the same time, as Prudentialist pointed out, he did do some things that were pretty big, right? And it's very haphazard. It's Trump. What do you want, right? Like he's exactly who you think he is, for better or for worse. I understand wanting DeSantis. I don't think that's a great idea for a couple of reasons. The biggest one, of course, is going to be the fact that basically you're just saying the FBI gets to get rid of anyone who they think is a threat to the system. Unless, of course, you think this was all like 4D chess, and what the FBI was actually doing was forcing people to double down on Trump because he can't actually win, and that's what they really wanted, was someone who wasn't going to be a threat. At that point, though, I think you're kind of just outplaying yourself. You're just, analysis paralysis will freeze you. Either way, I feel like this storyline has more or less cemented Trump as the presidential candidate for 2024. I don't see, unless his health or something precludes him, I don't see how the electorate picks kind of anyone else. But 2 years is a long time. Anything could happen. Again, something could happen with his health, or he could say something. DeSantis could just come out of the wings even stronger and make a even more compelling case. I do like DeSantis more than some people, but I just think that Trump is pretty much the obvious choice at this point.
Yeah, I think so as well. I get concerned over DeSantis primarily because his foreign policy track record in the House of Reps was far more neoconservative and hawkish than I'd like to admit. And when the sort of the Dispatch and the National Review types are, saying that he's pretty neoconservative in that area, I raise an eyebrow. As the system, at least the DC apparatus, continues to act the way that it does, you want to have a good framework for a state by state bulwark of governors actually doing things. And anytime that DeSantis does something, other Republican governors look up and listen, and that's been pretty good in my perspective.
Hmm. So Tom Bear here for $10. Thank you very much. Does it have anything to do with not launching a full-scale war on the Greater Israel Project? He muddied up the Belt and Road, which puts Jerusalem as the capital of the world. Basically, isn't Belt and Road the Chinese initiative?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm confused about what the question is then, but I'm not familiar.
I'm not too familiar with what the Greater Israel Project is. This would be something I'd
Okay.
have to look up to. But I mean,
Yeah.
he did do a lot to sort of muddy up Belt and Road for the regard of just trying to engage in trade with China, the perspective of trying to, but I mean, he did work a lot in regards to getting, the Middle East more or less to have sort of an Arab-Israeli alliance and the issues of like Syria and Iran. So, but I mean, I'd have to look up more for that and see what happened about it.
Okay. Sorry, we don't have more for you there, man. Let's see. Ramble and Gamble for $5. The medium streams and vids speaks more to under 45-year-olds, while the power 55 plus read articles and books. Should there be a Jacobin for the right? Revolver, cooperate or doom, or corporate or doom? I don't. I mean, there's plenty of outlets that are writing articles at this point. I feel like you've got guys like Compact who are coming out. We've got I am 1776. You've got, of course, the American Mind and places like that. So I feel like there are people who are just doing that, the kind of the work of articles and that kind of thing. You're right that there is a big generational gap, though I do notice that a lot more kind of the older generation are watching more videos now, though they tend to do it on things like Rumble. They tend to do it on like boomer targeted platforms. I mean, do we need more of everything? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know that I don't think there's like a dearth of writing, because the people tend to be a little more focused on streams. I can't do the very long streams that other people do, but I know a lot of people enjoy them. So I think it's just kind of, you know, doing a little something for everybody.
Yeah, the nice thing that I've seen as of late has been sort of bridging the gap by inviting the older crowd on to have discussions so they can kind of see where we're coming from. I mean, whether it's talking to Andrew Kloster or Jeremy Carl, that's a very good sign. But I mean, these are, people's names do get floated around in places like the American Mind or the American Affairs Journal, and you'd be surprised that there are quite a few under 45 people that are now writing in those publications. Not to mention sort of the growth of I Am 1776 and the American Affairs Journal taking very good pieces from younger individuals writing. And I mean, the American Mind is no stranger to sort of the internet side of things, having voices on and writing for them either. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, there should be more of that, I think, because there is no dearth of writing material out there. So why not? It wouldn't be a bad thing.
All right, Raging Mandrill for $2. Don't forget Waves type channels like Bergmade. I don't know anything about Bergmade. Do you know anything about Bergmade?
I don't know either, but maybe Bergmade has some of maybe the classics or more of the maybe neo-pagan stuff. I don't know, but if it's another
Yeah.
channel that is friendly to the right in that regard, then by all means go check them out.
Yeah, we do love our audiobook channels. I've used them quite extensively. I encourage you to do the same. I like to read things physically whenever possible, but I just get a lot more material when I'm able to, listen to a book while I'm mowing the lawn or working out or whatever. So, um, I
Yeah,
fully support those efforts.
yeah. As much as I like to physically read things, it's good to have audio too.
Ronald Fisher for $10. Any thoughts on the related They Can't Let Him Back In by Michael Anton? I have not read that. I had heard people talking about it, but I have not read that. Have you seen that at all? The Michael Anton's I think it's an article, right?
Yeah, it was in Compact Mag. I have not read it either, but I know that more or less that he sort of outlines and this was right before the raid. This was before at the end of July, where he more or less was just saying they cannot in any way, shape, or form get Trump back into the White House. So I guess his article has kind of got some clairvoyance to it.
Yeah, Anton's got a pretty good track record on that thing, so I'd probably listen when he speaks. Uh, Jarl here, thank you. Could 2024 push things to the brink? I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of the whole point of the stream, right? Is that this is unprecedented. This is some serious Rubicon crossing. This is another step in kind of the criminalization of political opposition. And so, could this take things there? Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think in many ways it might not. Um, there's only so many times that you can kind of spend the political energy of kind of the boomer generation, and kind of the Trump diehards, which, to be fair, this again something Yarvin has said repeatedly. You have to be careful about how you apply power, because you might end up kind of wasting your shot before you have it. You want to acquire more power. You don't just want to flex the minute you have it. So I'm not sure how things will shake out in 2024, but if you're betting against acceleration, that might be a losing bet.
Yeah, I mean, if this is, it seems like all bets are heading towards that direction. And so, I mean, if we are in the midst of that high, low versus middle, and I mean, if things are going to be at the brink, it would be when the middle class gets its biggest chance to voice itself in a political system, which would really be the election for the executive.
We have the Distributus here for $5. Hello, Distributus. Great to have you. He says, got the bad flu, but sending super chat money for appreciation. Yeah, no, thanks, man. Obviously, the Distributus is usually on around this time. I think he usually starts around 9. But it sounds like he's got a case of the COVIDs. Best wishes. Hope for a quick recovery. Thanks for watching, and everybody, make sure, of course, if you haven't been watching the Distributus, then I don't even know what to tell you at this point. Dave is obviously a old school in our circles. How many of us heard about it in the first place? So you should obviously be checking it out. Great to have him with us. And then Pete Budapest here for $5. Radlib shared a tweet thread from an Anon account today that was interesting. It said that the media and party elders seem nervous about this raid. Well, yeah, that was interesting. So we did have even some left-wing people were a little uncomfortable with some of this. Andrew Cuomo, interestingly, came out saying we need to immediately know the justification of this. There are a few other people that seem to be a little spooked by this. It does seem like a brazen move, and maybe they feel like the heat has been turned up too quickly. Maybe they are holding on to old ideas of kind of boundaries. The place that you shouldn't go in politics. Might be uncomfortable with the speed at which this is moving. Maybe they felt like Trump was defeated enough where this tactic was unnecessary. It's not a large amount of people, but there does feel like there's a rumbling of maybe we didn't need to do this. Maybe this was unnecessary.
Yeah,
But
I saw Andrew Cuomo tweeting about this,
mhm.
although it was very slanted in regards to January 6th.
It seemed
So
like he was just worried that it was going to mess up the January 6th
yeah,
investigation.
it
Yeah,
seemed more like that this was
yeah.
more attention about, oh, we're deviating away from like the main project of controlling and jailing the opposition, and not that you guys jumped the gun too soon or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like that's correct. Yeah, but I do think there are some people uncomfortable with the amount of power being flexed out there. So, yeah, who knows? I think they're probably just going to get pushed aside. But they probably have valid concerns in the end. All right, so want to thank a few people from Subscribestar for supporting the channel. Want to thank Easter Worshipper. I want to thank F1F00C09. I want to thank AWXYZ. I want to thank Santa. I want to thank Raymond01 and Claudio Van Landingham. Let's see. And I want to thank Jonathan Anomaly. Okay. Yep. I think that's everybody. So thank all of you for supporting on Subscribestar. If you'd like to do the same, you can follow the links below in the description. Obviously, if you're not subscribed to the Substack, Twitter, Gab, Rumble, Odyssey, all the alt tech stuff is in the description as well. You should also definitely make sure that you're subscribed to everything the Prudentialist is doing. He's got his link tree or the Find My Friend, sorry, in the description below, so you can find all this stuff. If there's anything coming up that you wanted to show before we head out, Prudentialist?
Yes. Again, thank you so much, Auron, for having me on. It's always a pleasure. And Dave, I hope that you start to feel better and that you're risen from your bed soon. I will be live this Thursday evening with Geo. We continue our little show that we've got going, the Digital Archipelago. This Saturday, I will have Matt and Dan of the New Right podcast, WRITE, to just talk about art and some of the work that they're doing. And then this Sunday will be the Sunday stream, as always, at 4 p.m. Eastern, talking about industrial warfare and globalization in an age of international relations in the 21st century. And as Auron has been referencing throughout the stream, please, if you have not read it, I have an article out in IM 1776 talking about, it's called Everywhere at the End of the West, and it's a reference to the caretakers everywhere at the end of time and our cultural memory as we seemingly keep rehashing the 20th century.
All right, guys, thanks again for coming by. Thanks again to Prudentialist. Always great to have him on. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.